Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I'm very excited to introduce our guest today. You guys might not know it, but I'm I'm aficionado, I would say, for poetry, literature. Very recently, I really thought that nonfiction books had no value, but I really have to contradict myself because nonfiction writers actually go way beyond the limits, and so I can't really tell you what reality is or not. And
Are
today,
you saying nonfiction or fiction?
nonfiction.
Okay.
And I want to introduce our guest again. My interest in poetry led me to the man I'm gonna introduce today. Um, and I'll let him explain his background, why we're here, and let him explain a little about his story. So, without further complications, let's just start. Mr. Moore, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for inviting me over.
If For our guest, can you introduce yourself? Like, who are you? What do you do?
My name is Indigo Moor. I am a writer. I am a layout engineer. I am a person seeking my next, I won't say plateau in life. I feel like I'm on a plateau. I just turned 60,
Mm-hmm.
and now I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do when I grow up. I was born here in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I left in '86 to join the Navy.
Okay.
I spent 10 years in the Navy, and I left. I was in California, and I spent 20 years in California working at Intel, and also, again, trying to figure out what I was going to do. I have a devout love of literature, and I wrote, and I became Indigo Moor at a time in my life when, again, I was looking for growth. I've written 4 books. I just finished my 5th manuscript. I've written 2 full-length stage plays, a screenplay. I've had several interviews, several essays and interviews. I've been on NPR, and now I'm trying to figure out who the hell I am.
You said the word plateau. That if you've hit a plateau,
Yes.
how many times have you hit plateaus in your life, and which one was the most significant for
I
you?
think the latest one is the most significant. It could be because it's the one that's on my mind most, but I lost a vision in my left eye, and that made it impossible to do engineering work anymore because what I did was layout engineering, which is on a computer screen,
Mm-hmm.
and to be able to see it, you need the depth perception, and I don't have it. And so I've moved back to North Carolina, and now I'm looking after finishing my last manuscript, which I was afraid I wouldn't be able to do because I was having trouble seeing the computer at first.
Mm-hmm.
But that's sort of evened out, and now I'm looking to get into a PhD program.
PhD program of what? Same thing, engineering?
No, God, no. I don't have an engineering degree.
Oh, so
So I spent it's part of my time in the Navy as a nuclear reactor operator, and to do that, you have to go through 2 years of school,
mm-hmm.
and you do nothing but engineering work. So when I got out of the Navy, Intel hired me as an engineer. Well, actually, as a factory operator, and I took another class and became an engineer, and I worked on that forever, all the time knowing I was a writer. But being a writer doesn't always pay the bills. But yes, I want to get it in a PhD program
so
for literature.
uh, so why did it take so long for you to fill those shoes of the writer? I mean, which you are right. Reality is that you still have to continue paying bills, and unless what I feel is like most writers are recognized after their death.
That could be true, but I have good friends who've done well as writers or as writers slash teachers.
Mm-hmm.
And what took me so long is My last manuscript that I just completed and I'm sending out everywhere for publication is called Reconstructing Eden, a Southern Bastard's lyric journey. And it describes what it was like growing up for me in North Carolina
Mm-hmm.
and how lost I felt, how having no understanding of who I was, especially being black, having no understanding of that and what it meant to the world. And I was running all the time. I was running from how I grew up. I was running from the fear of being poor. I was running from anything that I felt was in my path without knowing that I was constantly running. And when I came back this time, I had a chance, or I didn't have a chance, I had the opportunity, let's say that, to slow down my life, to just breathe a little bit. I've had help from friends, and I have become a person that is now looking for my future without running from my past.
What does that mean to you in literature though? Does your book portray real experiences or is it more fiction based?
Oh, it's real experiences, and I have friends who've read it because
Mm-hmm.
after you write something, you have to have people that you trust to tell you that it sucks, or at least, or at least it is worth continuing. And I've had friends who have read
Okay.
it, and they understand for the most part that I'm writing about me, but it's very biographical and it's very true.
What were those experiences growing up?
Oh God, there was so many of them. I wrote about being at the park with my friends, and we had been told, don't go over this section of the park, and we couldn't go over the section of the park because it was basically inhabited by white people,
Mm-hmm.
and
How old were
we
you?
about 7, I think, maybe 8. And it would be nice to say that we listened, but we didn't listen. We didn't listen to anyone. So we went across, and one of the things that happened was this man claimed that a friend of mine spit on him. And he grabbed him by the neck, and he had him up like this in like a V fashion. And all we could do was stand there and watch. He did put him down eventually, and you could see that he felt bad. But these are the types of things that help us grow into who we would be. I knew that I had anger in me, but I didn't recognize until I got into the Navy exactly how much anger I had. And the book starts with me attempting to kill a shipmate, someone on our side, during Desert Storm. And the book progresses from there, going back to my childhood to say how I became this person and how I became someone who would do something like this, and how I eventually came to understanding that I had anger in me.
And how do you take out that anger without hurting anyone?
Well, you have to recognize that anger doesn't come from one place. And it didn't come from just the situations I've discussed. It came from many things, many black experiences, many black and white experiences, many experiences that I didn't even recognize were leading to anger. And the only way to come to grips with any of it is to revisit it. People often say that, a writer is a person who looks at things more deeply. I think there was a poet in California who said that we didn't know more than anyone else. We just looked at things deeper than a lot of people did. And
Hmm.
looking at these things, you come to an understanding of who you are and why you became the person you are.
Do you feel like you have a better understanding of yourself now since you said that? Because to me, your words you said you came back and it was just like different. That for the first time you weren't running from anything. So,
Yes.
w- what does that mean to your writing then?
Well,
And how do you revisit all your other writings?
my other writings in the Room of Thirst and Hungers when I was looking at Paul Robeson and Othello, and in high school,
Mm-hmm.
we were taught that Paul Robeson was someone, the maybe hour that we spent on him was someone who was a traitor, that he was a man who hated his country, and these things were not true. So in high school, I learned this, and I learned also about Othello, who was a man who hated being black and struggled to be white. And by the time like 1999, when I was in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I read Martin Duberman's uh, book on Paul Robeson, and he was talking about Othello in there, and the things that I had learned about Robeson, about Othello, were not true,
Hmm.
and they mirrored a lot of what I'd gone through. Obviously, I wasn't alive during the time of the Moors, and I wasn't alive during Paul Robeson's time frame.
Mirrored in
Yes,
what way?
I'm sorry.
Mirrored in what way?
Oh yes, mirrored in that the lack of understanding of who you were led people to believe things about you that were not true.
Because you're not acting like yourself?
Well, because you're acting in a way that they don't understand, and it's easy for them to say, well, he's acting this way for this reason. Paul Robeson was not trying to be white. Othello was not trying to be Venetian. They were both being themselves, but the interpretation of who they were was something different than they actually presented themselves.
So do you feel like when because you could call them anomalies, right? Like they portray themselves differently than anyone has before. Let's call it a black man or a Hispanic man.
Mm-hmm.
So, be, is that what was it called when I can't get the word. Is it? It's on the tip of my tongue. It's it's when you act like something you're not, or you feel like you're something you're not. It's like I can't find the word. Okay, so revisiting what you said, how, how do those people portray themselves in society then?
Paul Robeson portrayed himself as an intelligent man, as valedictorian of his class, as an actor, as a football player, and as a man who felt he was as much a man as anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
When he went before the McCarthy Commission, they kept trying to say, you're anti-American, and he said, I'm the most American man in this room. Which is probably not the thing you should say to the McCarthy Commission. If you look at Langston Hughes is viewed as someone who, I won't say escaped the McCarthy Commission, but he got out of it without losing anything. But to me, Robeson was the way that we should have been looking at. He kept saying, look, I'm doing what's right by me. I'm doing what's right by my people. And you cannot tell me that what I'm doing is not right. And he refused to be talked over. He refused to be muted in the society. If you look at Othello, his way of doing things was just to be who he was. He's fictional, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And I had him.
So it was more of a personal conviction that he had.
Exactly right. Yes, he wasn't trying to be white. He wasn't trying to be Venetian. He was trying to be, at that time, a Negro. And that's it. Which is why I had the two of them talking to each other in my third book.
So is that you? Is that you talking though through them?
Wow. Did you read the book?
No, but
Okay,
I am.
Yeah, it was me, of course, because what I'm talking about is the things I see in themselves that represented how I wanted to be.
I asked you that question because like I said, I do a little bit of poetry, I do a little bit of
Mm-hmm.
writing, and sometimes I make up these fictional characters, or even how I portray myself in
Mm-hmm.
this society today,
Yes.
to where I don't feel like I always fit, right? But maybe Mario doesn't fit, but I create this persona that does fit, and then
Yes.
suddenly the room doesn't seem as bad.
Yes. In the Room of Thirsts and Hungers, and I describe it in the opening in my foreword to the book, that the Room of Thirsts and Hungers is my head. It's my thirsts and my hungers for how I feel that African Americans should be treated, how I feel I want to be treated in the society.
So tell me how it does that explain in today's society, or because I mean obviously we can't go back, right? But
Right.
so that explains how you want to be treated as a black man in this society, and how you
Yes.
think black people should be treated in this society.
Yes. I don't think that's ever going to happen, but yes, I do believe it.
But tell me then, what uh how do you believe then they should be treated?
I think that's a broad question, but I can give some tiny bits. I think the equality. I think the time that we can stop saying African American and excuse me and say American would be great. But to do that, we'd have to have this understanding that African Americans are not African American, they're American. When we look around, we see so many things and we automatically assume that only a white person created them.
Because that's what we've been taught. Yes.
Exactly. To understand or to look at something and say someone else or some other color could have created it would be a beginning, only a beginning. I don't think it'll ever happen. I think this country is based or it's dependent on racism. And it's dependent on racism not to hate, but it's dependent on racism because we have an economic structure that we have to maintain. And that economic structure is sort of dependent on one particular group leading the way.
I like to believe
Uh-huh.
in the idea of hope. I
I do too,
do.
yes.
I do. I think Barack did a bad job on that, just
I
because
think so too, to be honest, yes.
I and I've never seen it that way, right? But
Mm-hmm.
we do live in a capitalistic country.
Yes.
It's always marketing. It's always I think this country tries to create a lot of division because that's just what keeps it going.
Yes, absolutely.
I can count on my fingers the amount of people that know their neighbors. And I think that
Yeah,
says a lot.
that's very true. Yeah. When I was a kid, growing up, not that far from here, and oh, I
Well,
can't
yeah,
remember
where'd
the
you
name of
grow up? Yeah,
it.
because I mean, I didn't I was born in Mexico. I came here when I was
Mm-hmm.
5, and lived in Charlotte for the past 15 years. But
Mm-hmm.
so you were raised here.
I was raised here, yes, and oh God, it's a neighborhood not that far from here. It's off Caps Hill Mine Road, down Bettisford Road, it's like a mile and a half from here. Yeah,
Okay.
so yeah, and it's Queen. Oh my gosh, I can't remember the name of the neighborhood.
Is
But
it where Johnson and C. Smith
it's
is?
not even that far. Yeah,
No, it's
it's by
before.
the YMCA. That's the road you go down to get to where I used to live. Yeah,
Okay, okay.
yeah, and yeah, it was when I first got there. They had streets, but they didn't have street lights yet. No buses came through there, and at nighttime we would walk the neighborhood, and that's what people would do. We knew everyone because everybody walked the neighborhood. Yeah, it looked like we were on like a voyage or something. But yeah, it was a very different place and a very different world. But we were also insulated in that area. If you went downtown, it was all black people right in the square. And now it's not. I don't mind that it's not because,
Mhm.
they got better restaurants there now,
Yeah.
better wineries, and it's a
Yes.
beautiful thing. But I know what it takes to change an area like that, and it's not my favorite understanding. There's a wonderful poem I like everyone to look up. It's on YouTube, and it's called "When the Cancer Comes," and I cannot remember the name of the poet who does it, but it talks about his father getting cancer and how he relates it to the gentrification of his neighborhood, and it's a wonderful poem, and I think people like that are what you were talking about, or we can bring it all the way back to the beginning, that poets look deeper. And understanding a poem like that helps you to understand your own psyche, your own heart, and how this world works.
You said psyche, right? So
Yes,
psyche, yes. And
yes.
what do you know about? Do you think a writer's psyche is different?
I don't think it's different. I have a friend in California. I have a lot of friends in California.
Mm-hmm.
But one of them said, you have too much time to think. And that's true, yes, because at the time, the reason I came back to North Carolina is it wasn't like something happened, but something happened to me. And it put me in isolation
Mm-hmm.
because I'm not a person. I know like four people in Charlotte right now.
Really?
Yeah, that's it.
Growing up?
No, well, many of them have died. Many of them have died either through drugs or they've gone to prison. And I can't say I was all that important to them in the beginning. So going away for so long and coming back, and I'm not very Charlotte right now. And it makes it difficult to maintain friends or to find new ones. I'm looking for my next area that I'm going to be in. But that's not the question you asked. What did you ask me?
I asked do if writers have a different type of understanding of their own psyche. That's kind of what I was
I
going
think
to.
writers can have
Because
a
you said
different,
your
yes.
friend in California.
Yes, I think writers can have a different psyche. I think they often cultivate a different understanding of who they are. But that doesn't mean they all succeed. I don't even know if I've succeeded. I am constantly trying to move to something different.
But why do you constantly want to keep on moving to something different? It's just
No, it makes sense.
it's
Yeah,
just a general question because I
yeah.
mean I feel like I have that,
Mm-hmm.
and I haven't come to grasp the idea that it might be my trauma,
Yes.
because then trauma is I think language is very weird because I could easily say words don't come alive unless they come alive through you. It
Yes.
doesn't mean something. The word in itself doesn't mean something. Words come alive through people, right? So if I say it, it means something different than when you say it, right?
Yes, I think people invent words all the time. I know there are words in some of my books that I've completely made up, but the context that I'm using them in makes it understandable. So yeah, I believe that the psyche that we are inhabiting and that writers inhabit, we're constantly trying to understand the world, or at least our world. And as we do this, we are moving into areas that we don't even understand ourselves, and we're trying to bring it down to something we do understand.
Don't you think that's an endless uh, turmoil? Like,
Oh yeah, yeah. I think that one of our last words will probably be "and another thing" right before I die. But
make sure
it's
you do
exactly
this.
right. Yes.
So, do you feel like you're gonna why start writing books then after you had a long successful career in what you did? Why suddenly start writing it on paper? Was there a certain point where someone gave you inspiration, or you just hit your point to where I just can't stand this in my head, I have to put it on paper?
I think it's more of the latter. And it was 99 that I realized that, I was going to devote a certain part of my life to writing, that it wasn't just going to be something I did, that I was going to devote myself to getting better and writing all the time.
And how do you start doing that? Because I bet that just like any other creator, you have mental blocks, you yourself self-sabotage. How do you become a better writer?
You have to write. And I know it sounds strange, but you have to read and you have to write. I hear people all the time, or enough of the time, saying, well, I don't want to read because I don't want someone else's work to, disrupt what I'm thinking. And I think that's some bullshit.
That
It,
I've thought that.
Here's why I think it's bullshit.
Okay.
Why did the chicken cross the road?
I'm not sure.
To get to the other side.
Curiosity then.
No. The only reason you know the answer to that joke is because someone's told you. You've heard it before.
Yes.
What if you'd never heard it before and this was the first time I'd ever given it to you? What if you thought at your age that you came up with that joke on your own and you're giving it to people every day? Writers are no different. Every time you see something or you read something, it's inhabiting you. You get to understand that Mary Pierce, that Yusuf Komunyakaa, that Tayimba Jess, all of these people are writing and they're inventing things. And the more you write, the more you will invent on your own. But only if you read will you read something and understand that it's been done before, that it's been done in that way, that it's been done a million times in that way, and you need to come up with something different.
I feel like that can easily become you can easily become very negative, that you're seeing what you thought you could have thought of being done by someone else.
Oh yeah. I've run across poems, and it doesn't happen that often, but it happens enough where you read something, you think, I should have thought of that. I should have written that. And there's nothing you can do about it except be pissed that the person came up to it at first, and that hasn't happened, thank you, except with one poem. But yes, I am constantly trying to invent. My last manuscript that I just wrote, I invented a poetic form, and I call it the Bastard Villanelle. And it rhymes throughout the poems, but it has one particular rhyme that sticks throughout the poem. And that just shows, by the definition of a bastard, I'm a bastard. And I wanted that to stick through the poems, to stick through the manuscript, to be reminded that this person has something almost like the Sleeping Beauty. I think it wasn't Sleeping Beauty, it was the Princess and the Pea, that it has this one thing that sticks in him. And I think being able to invent new things doesn't have to be rhyming, doesn't have to be form, but you're inventing a new style, a new understanding of how something's done. When I teach students, I teach them all the time, you may think you're writing like someone else, but no one has your experiences. And since no one has your experiences, you will always write differently than they do. You will always choose a word they would not have chosen. You will always choose a stanza they would not have chosen. So write all the time.
You said you teach. How many people's lives have you been able to, you think, change through your teachings?
I don't know. I mean, I've taught in taught at the master's program at the University of Southern Maine. I've had online workshops. I was the poet laureate of Sacramento and taught workshops at libraries. And each time you go in and you feel great and you leave exhausted because you just put everything you had into it. And then you leave and you don't know how you've affected these people until they write to you. Or you see someone has used your name in an essay that they've written. And you realize you've affected people even though you're just trying to do what you feel is right. So I have no idea how many people.
You said you feel drained when it's done because in the moment they're not giving you the same energy back.
Oh, they are giving you the same energy back. And for me, as they give you the energy back, you're trying to give them as much as you can in that hour or 2 hours or that week or whatever. And by the time you finish, I think a lot of teachers feel this way. They just feel drained. Like you've given everything you can, and now you just need to rest or get a drink. Or get a drink and rest. Either one of those things.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
And how did that teaching part change your writing? Did it start you realizing certain things while you were teaching?
I don't think that's happened. I mean, I've been taught things by students
Mm-hmm.
about things that they've said, but I don't think it's affected my writing openly, or maybe I've just never thought about it that way.
No, because like if you're like I don't know, you're teaching or you said you've done a lot of these different uh, uh classes,
Yes.
but then does that make you more critical of your own work?
I think it does. One of the things that I did near the end of my time teaching at Stone Coast,
Mm-hmm.
and the workshop that I taught in the Sierra Mountains at the college there, I would have people look at my work because I give them something that I had written, but not something that I'd gone over many times, and I tell them, okay, critique this work, because what I was always telling them was that every poet is no different from you. They sit down, they write, and sometimes they get something great, sometimes they don't. And I said, we are here to work on our own abilities to critique, and we're looking at famous poets and famous writings and having them critique them, and I have them critique mine. And in that sense, it definitely makes me wonder if what I've written is any good, because they'll just go at it. And normally they have good things to say, but every once in a while they'll find something and I've got a choice. I can tell them, wow, I didn't catch that. Or I'll say, yes, I left that in specifically for you to catch it.
But is that an excuse or?
I'm not going into that. We'll just keep moving. What's your next question? Yes.
I get it. I get it. What would you say? What's the idea kind of like behind every book? Like, how does that transition? Is everything, every book a different story? Does it all connect back to one idea, or it's different ideas?
I think I think both answers are true. Um, when I start writing something, like I start a few poems, I pretty much know it's going to end up in a book. And I pretty much already know what the book is about.
One poem into a whole book.
Yes. And I can't say it's the right way to do it, because one of the things it prevents me from doing is I don't send out many individual poems to be published. And I don't know if you're familiar with Submittable. Submittable is it's a brilliant concept. You can have a journal or a university, and you can sign up a Submittable, and they will track people sending things to you to be published. And so I have a Submittable account like most poets do, and I can look and see what's been rejected and accepted.
By the university.
By a journal, by a university, anything that Submittable tracks. And I have very few poems that have been accepted, but I've had books that have been accepted. And normally, what happens? Oh, no one's watching this. Normally, what happens when you won't tell anyone. Normally, what happens is I'll get a manuscript accepted to be published, and then I have to say, "Oh my God, I got to get these poems published so that I can have the acknowledgments page." So I'm sitting out poems, and I'm saying, the manuscript that this poem is in has been accepted by this particular press, and I would love to add your name to the acknowledgments page. And that's how I end up getting a lot of the poems published.
Okay. It's because
I'm not saying that's the way anyone should do things, but I also, because going back to the question you asked, um, I had a troubled relationship with my brother.
okay.
And
Younger or
my
older?
brother, 1 year older.
1 year older.
Yes, and
You didn't tell me about your family. You guys were a big family.
we were a big extended family,
Okay.
and there were like 9 of us that lived in this small 2-bedroom house. Or was it 3 bedrooms? It was 3-bedroom house, yes. And I shared a room with my brother and 2 uncles. And my relationship with my brother will be with me until the day I die. And I've noticed that many of the books that I've written have dealt with that. If you look at In the Room with Thirst and Hungers, Paul Robeson and Othello are basically brothers in this book.
Okay.
And I've got Taproot, which is my first book, and it explores the relationship between my brother and I, and the relationship of African Americans to North America. And again, it's dealing with relationships with my brother. I've worked on a novel, and again, there was a slave and a slave master, and they were essentially brothers. And it just comes across in a lot of my writing.
With your brother, why? What
I wrote an
was
entire book trying to figure that out. I think we were never taught to love.
as people or as brothers?
As people.
Okay.
Yes.
Why do you say that though? Isn't that?
I know it's something that there are people who understand that, and there's a lot of people who
No,
don't understand it.
I think I can though,
Mhm.
because I'm the oldest brother. A lot of the things that you're saying, our stories aren't the same,
Mm-hmm.
but I grew up with a lot of anger. Because again, not that I was poor, not that my parents didn't provide for me
Mm-hmm.
the meals that I needed, but because I was lacking in so many ways.
Yes.
I think inside and out, that I
Mhm.
grew up with this very cynical mindset that the world was out to get me.
Yes. Yeah.
But I was so worried just about me
Mm-hmm.
that for the first basically 20 years of my life, I never saw my brother.
Wow. Sorry to hear that.
And I came to find love or understanding until me and him kind of talked the first time. And I don't know what age it broke, right? But
Mm-hmm.
I kind of grew up dismissing him, or
How
he
old
was
are you now? I have no idea.
27.
Okay. Yes.
So I grew up dismissing him. Again, so that's why I said the first 20 years of my life.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, not that after 20 I had this vision or anything. No, it was just,
Yes.
it just kind of like our relationship developed. So that's why I find it very intriguing that you said that we aren't taught to love.
Mm.
I think I found that out little by little, and even till now I'm still learning through my brother, because
Yes.
I didn't see him, and honestly I kind of feel bad, because I mean, for most of his life, or we grew up to be our childhood, right? A lot of our childhood plays out into our adult life. So
Yes.
now that I actually understand that, I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
In what ways did I change my brother? Like in what
Yes.
ways could I have played out a better part as a bigger brother to him? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's not only him, it's more of me, I guess, because I'm his older brother. So I think that culturally too, it's like the oldest brother, or at least for me, right? It's like the oldest brother always has to lead, and I was never a good leader to him,
Uh-huh.
and that's why I kind of lack. Like I feel like I lack even in business, because I'm like, how? I'm a firm believer, the way that you do one thing, you do everything.
I would agree with that.
So
Yes.
if you get up, make your bed at least,
Mm-hmm.
have your home organized. That's kind of how your life plays out, right?
Hmm.
Like I have this because I've seen it with my dad. It's like you can clearly see how people live their life and how successful they are based on how their house is.
Hmm.
Because I've thought about writing a book too, but
Mm-hmm.
I just don't want to get into it because I'm like, it's hard.
I
I,
think not wanting to get into it is
I
the worst reason to not write a book.
yeah. But the funny thing though is that I have a title,
Yes.
365 days in my dad's garden.
Wow, that is a good title. Yeah.
Um, and basically it talks about kind of how our dad has treated us as a plant, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
or how I see the house. It's like trim the bushes, make sure you rake the leaves, make sure you water the flowers. All those simple things. It's like
Mm-hmm.
you can play that out just into write about anything.
Yes.
It's like watering plants is like watering the people around you.
Mm-hmm.
Cleaning up the leaves is like picking up for others or something like that, right? Like the
Yes.
way,
Yes.
because you said contribute,
Mm-hmm.
which I haven't until recently. I'm like, okay, uh, the best way I can have a successful life is how much I can contribute to others.
I like that.
And I don't know about this, you tell me, right? But I feel like your contribution is your writing.
Well, that can be said to be true, yes. And I feel like I'm contributing in that way, but I feel that I'm lacking in a lot of ways. I'm 60 years old. I've had a pretty successful life up until now. And
Successful in what ways though? Because you keep on saying I'm lacking. So
I am certainly lacking. I think,
so you're saying successful in certain parts, but you're lacking, or you think you're lacking in other unsuccessful parts.
yes, I'll say familial. I'll say
That's where you're lacking.
economically. Yeah, I think I'm lacking in a lot of ways. I I kind of feel like one of the reasons I came back here was to restart my life. I have a good friend, Elizabeth Rosner, who has an incredible book out, and I'm going to butcher the title of it. It's called the third ear. That's not the name of it. I'll swear I'll look at my phone and get it soon. But she said to me, she's German, and when I turned 60, she said to me, it gave me a German saying that was basically to the effect of, may your next 60 years, be fruitful. And that's sort of, it's a stupid thing to feel like, oh my God, I got 60 years left. And that's kind of how I felt. Like I just turned 60 and now I got to start my next 60 years. And it made me feel good. I mean, this was back in May. She told me this. And now I kind of feel like I'm starting my next 60 years
Why
and
do
I
you
want to
say
do
it's
things right.
stupid based on what
I'm not going to
society?
live another 60 years. That's why. But I
Okay.
kind of feel like I am. I feel like I'm moving towards this next 60 years and I want to do things right or at least better.
Okay, so tell me, you've lived 60 years, and uh, I'll ask you the question
Okay?
last. I feel like people only die or start dying when they have no purpose, or they feel like they have no purpose. They're not
Yes.
serving a purpose. They're not
Mm-hmm.
aiding in no one's purpose.
Yes.
So therefore, that dictates how long you live, right?
I would agree.
So just the fact that you said that you feel like you're restarting your life, that must be energizing, right?
It
It,
is.
uh, and that's what essentially life is, right? Like the
Yes.
your purpose. So what is your purpose?
Hmm. I think my purpose is to grow more intimate with myself, to understand who I am deeper than I did yesterday, to try to influence others more importantly than I did a week ago. I think my purpose is to be better than I am, to just be better than I am.
But don't you think that you hit another plateau with that mindset?
Sure, I'm hoping by the time I'm 80, I'll be thinking, I need to strive for something else. But right now, I'm only 60, so I don't get to think that way.
I really like that, because a lot of the times I think to myself, or a lot of people around me, they're like, you only stop when you crash or hit a wall. I'm like, yeah, that's just kind of the way I like it, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Like I I I can't stop. I
Mm-hmm.
can't, right? And what I'm going with that is that I think as artists, as writers, as poets, we'll have a never ending love to finding ourselves, which I think a lot of people from the outside would look at it like, wow, you just uh you never conform.
Yeah,
And that's only because people do conform.
yeah.
I've seen a lot of people that live very unhappy lives because they chose to be complacent.
Yes.
And there's a lot of free spirited people out there that are 1,000 times happier because they actually listen to themselves.
I have a good friend, Eva Ing, and she lives in Boston. No, she lives in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and she was a genetic engineer. When I,
Genetic engineers, does that touch with like DNA and stuff like that?
yes,
Okay.
and I'm pretty sure she was a genetic engineer. She's gonna see this and say what the hell he's talking about. But she was working at a company that did that, and she was making good money, and she left, and she became an artist. She was not a great artist, and she was pretty much, I won't say starving for a long time, but not doing well for a long time. But she was happier. And this was something that kind of blew me away. I had never heard of anyone doing something like that, or someone giving themselves permission to change like that. And it affected me. I don't think I ever told her that how she did that affected me greatly.
That's when that inspired you to also do the same
It
thing?
inspired me to become a writer. Yes, this is 1999.
But what about your story? Who did you kind of make unhappy because you chose to be a writer?
People in my life.
Your family?
No, because at that time I wasn't really talking to them, and it wasn't like I was avoiding them. Hell, maybe I was avoiding them, but it wasn't like I was saying, you people are bad for me, because I didn't feel that way. I felt that the life was bad for me, but I didn't know how it was bad for me because I wasn't looking at myself or taking stock of how I grew up. I was years away from that. And I wasn't being a part of their lives. I didn't know how to be a part of their lives. When the phone would ring and I would see that it was them, or I had a feeling it was them, my stomach would knot. And I would feel like, God, I don't want to answer the phone. And I know I wasn't a good grandson to my grandmother. I know I wasn't a good grandson to my grandfather. These were things I needed to explore in my writing. And it would be another 7 years before I even began looking at that, at my brother's death.
And that's what inspired also one of your books too then?
It inspired my first book, yes, Taproot.
And that's more kind of like familial.
Yes, it was. It was all about, it was all about growing up with my brother, basically.
Wow, so your books I mean, first you have to know the author, right? And then kind of like the way
It helps.
I
Yes.
I think I really like that because I think even whenever you're reading a book, you're having a conversation, a dialogue with the person you're reading, right?
Yes.
Like, and I think people have a very hard time reading a book because they just see it as words.
Yes.
They don't see it as someone wrote this, someone had to dive deeper into their own mind
Yes.
to even find their own truth. So maybe people just look at books and it's like, oh, you're just writing words. But I like to do a little bit of research on like who the writer is, why they wrote the book, right? Like there's a lot of psychologists that end up publishing books, but I'm like, what motivated you to do that? You know, like
Yes.
because then you get a deeper understanding, a better connection with the book, and even with poems, you can. I love poems just because you can feel the intensity of what the author is saying through words.
Yes.
And I think they put so much intensity because it's only a few lines. It's not like I can give you an essay explaining my feelings, but they can explain it away in what 6 sentences or less. You know, like
Yes.
it's always
Patricia Smith is one of our greatest American poets. Put on had a poem of the day from I want to say it's poets.org, but I could be wrong. There's a lot of things I could be wrong about in this interview. Don't take anything I'm saying seriously. But she had this poem called Birthday, and you're reading it, and it's a long enough poem, and she's describing a boy on a table, and he's being examined, and he's dead, and she's talking about what he went through and what the mother has gone through, and everything is done so fucking well that it's a book that if it was a book in your hand, you would throw it across the room because it was that incredibly non-violent and violent within you. She's an incredible writer and she's a poet. And you just want to say, how do you see it? How do you see something like that? We know how you see it. We just don't know how to see it the way she does. And that's what we're talking about. That's what we're talking about today, yes. How do we see who we are and how do we see what it is that this world is presenting us?
and just to give people a little bit of context, I found you through actually a meetup group that you were
Yes.
trying to create, which
Yeah.
I always find interesting because you're in search of something and you're in search of people that think like you, right?
Yes.
By creating this group,
Yes.
you think that will take you to the next step you're looking for?
It'll take me to a step that hopefully I don't even know is there. Yes.
Okay. Because who is kind of the audience you were broadcasting that group for?
Anyone who has an interest in poetry or an interest in written word and an interest in just being around other people who do.
Why? Because you think that not everyone can understand it the same way?
No, I think that we can all understand it the same way, but I think we have a fear of seeing ourselves in others or a fear of seeing others in ourselves.
Because it's not a show. You have to be vulnerable to do that.
Yes, you have to have a certain degree of vulnerability.
know your truths as well.
Yes.
Know your
Or at
weaknesses.
least being willing to be open to it.
And that's what I think that I fear with my own writing, because at some point I have to give a part of myself to others.
Oh, yeah.
And access to that is, you'll know me, and I don't necessarily know if you want, I don't necessarily want you to know me, it's
You know, my first book came out, and it was actually, I was living in California, and it was published by Main Street Rag, which is near here.
yeah.
But the guy didn't know that I was from here. And maybe he saw, some of the things I wrote about there about the South, so he liked the book and he published it. And I came back here to read at a festival by Johnson C. Smith University, who also didn't know that one of the places I grew up is like half a mile away down the street.
Yeah, so
Exactly. So I'm there, and my family's there, and this was a book that I was afraid about some of the poems in there that they were going to hear. And I'm up there, there's like 200 people in the audience, and I'm reading, and they're down front. I'm like, oh God, what are they going to think when I read this poem? And I'm reading it, I'm about halfway through, and I look out in the audience, and they're like this, just looking around and looking at their watches. And it made sense to me that they were not going to be as interested or as understanding that this was all autobiographical to me. So you can't worry about what other people are going to think, because in the end they can write their own books if they think it was different. And I understand that some of the things that I wrote about may not be how they remember it, but it's how I remember it, and it affected me.
So is that a message you try to give to like young writers, not
All
worry
the
about it?
time. All the time. Yeah, I give that all the time. You can't control what other people think about it. Natalie Diaz, her first book was When My Brother Was an Aztec, and it's a fabulous book.
When My Brother Was an Aztec.
Yeah, great book.
Yeah.
And she had some of her relatives say things to her that I'm not going to repeat here, but that's how it's going to be, because they're not going to write a book, and they're not going to write about what she was feeling, but it's her responsibility to write about what she was feeling.
So an author also has to have that idea that people might not even understand, the people that she's writing about might not even understand what they're saying, even though they live the same thing.
Exactly, right? Or they just don't want to hear what you have to say, because what you have to say sometimes it's not beautiful. Or even though it's beautiful on the page, it's not beautiful for other people to hear.
So you kind of gave up on the idea that your family would understand it.
I won't say I gave up on it,
Uh-huh.
but it got pushed way back that they would understand it. For the most part, they probably won't even read the book. But yeah, I mean, my last book, my last manuscript, it has some hurtful things in it. And there are many hurtful things that I left out of this manuscript, but I do recognize that how I grew up was traumatic. And I wrote about this trying to get someone to understand how I grew up with anger, even if I didn't recognize it as anger. Even though I spent most of my childhood smiling or just completely quiet, that it was growing an anger in me. That, yes, I did what I did during Desert Storm, and it was something that I regret, but something I understood that I needed to go through.
You needed to go through what? The re-evaluating that part, or?
Yeah, let's go with that, yes.
Okay. But now do you feel like it was everything that you told me, it lives in you, or do you block it out?
I don't block it out. I think I used to block it out, but I don't anymore.
because to end the episode, you explained to me then about the pigeon. Is that kind of what you were?
It's how I live every damn day of my life. Yes.
It all makes. Well, I need to read your books, right, to get a little bit into insight into your mind, but it kind of starts making sense because of why you said pigeons.
Yes.
Why you said that. How do you carry 1,000 pounds of pigeons in a truck?
They can only carry 500 pounds.
That can only carry 500 pounds.
Right. You have to keep 500 pounds of them flying at all times.
Thank you, Mr. Moore, for being here on this episode. Thank you for taking the time to
My pleasure.
Give us a little bit of introduction to your books. I haven't read it, to be honest, but I was just so intrigued on why you started a meetup group and how you explained it. I was like, you want to understand literature, you want to break it down for other people, which
yes.
I find that a great idea, and I hope you do have success in doing that. And I'm gonna try to broadcast it too through our podcast. That's what you're trying to do.
Well,
also, any last comments you would like to make before we close out?
There is. I promised you that I would tell you Elizabeth Rosner's new book, because it's a fantastic book. I've known her for a few years, and she's one of these people that, all my German friends tend to be brilliant. And I have 3, and they've all written books, and they're just fantastic. And you may notice that I'm trying to stall you while I go through my phone to find the name of this book. And it is called Third Ear.
Third Ear.
Third Ear. And it's by Elizabeth Rosner. And it's a fantastic book on the ability to listen. And she's brilliant.
Nonfiction?
It's nonfiction, yes.
Okay. So it takes us through a story.
No, see, I think you meant fiction when you were speaking before. Nonfiction.
Oh yeah, I did. I am so.
That's all right.
Fiction.
Nonfiction it's
real. She's
written lots of fiction, or a few fiction books that I love, especially Blue Nude. But yes, it's an incredible nonfiction book.
Okay, and we'll make sure to check it out. And guys, if you stayed to the end of the episode, make sure you guys check out Mr. Moore's books. I'll have the links in the description to a little bit more background of who he is, what he's written. And Mr. Moore, thank you for being on the episode. And
my pleasure.
This was just, I think, a small introduction because I'm very interested.